Hey guys, this video is really for the violin specialist, those who are deeply interested in the topic. It's probably not going to be a video for general consumption unless you have a particular side interest in antique objects like violins. Otherwise, I'll just say from the outset, it's really for the violin specialist. But I wanted to talk about in this video the violin collector Baron von Knoop, or maybe it's Baron von Knoop, who knows, Baron von Knoop, shall we say, who possibly may have had the largest collection of fine violins. I think that's maybe something I'll need to verify. Certainly he had a very impressive collection. Now I'm borrowing very heavily on some articles from the Strad magazine in order to make this video, but I'm going to also showcase some of his instruments, some of the famous ones, notably the Lady Blunt. And if you can hear grunting, it's this guy who's staying with us today, and unfortunately he can't breathe very well, so there may be a little bit of grunting in this video from the Frenchie. So, who was Baron von Knoop? Yeah, I was just going to talk about the Lady Blunt in passing before I come to it in more detail, because that is one of the, I believe, best ever preserved Stradivarius violins, along with instruments like the Messiah. So, yep, we'll go through the instruments, we'll go through some articles in the Strad, and also the Territio view of Baron von Knoop, where you can get to all the list of instruments. So he was a German collector. He was born in 1846 and he died in 1918. He was a member of that small fraternity of collectors who managed to put together a quartet of Stradivari instruments, 2 violins, a viola and a cello. Knoop did it not once but twice. He put together 2 quartets of Stradivari instruments. That's no small feat to do that. Between 1876 and 1903, Knoop had acquired over 40 instruments, including 19 Strads and 3 by Guarneri del Gesù. His father, Ludwig, let's talk a little bit about him. In 1852, Ludwig established his own company, L. Knoop & Co., based in Moscow and St. Petersburg, and he adopted Russian citizenship. By 1877, the 25th anniversary of Ludwig's company, he had helped establish more than 100 cotton mills and had supplied 187 different factories with machinery. His name became so popular in Russia that it was mentioned in a proverb: every church has a priest, every factory a Knoop. Considering that textiles accounted for 28% of Russia's industrial output and 30% of its workforce, it's easy to see why the Tsar gave Ludwig the title of Baron in 1877. So this was a guy, Johann Knoop's father was a guy who rose up in the business world, shall we say. Ludwig moved back to Bremen in Germany in 1861, by which time he and his wife Louise had 6 children. He purchased a large tract of land in St. Magnus, a small village just outside Bremen. There he had a large house built, which was later expanded into a castle known as Schloss Mühlental. Johann was Ludwig's second child and first son. He was born in Russia and spent his childhood there. His mother, Louise, played the piano, and all of the children were required to take piano lessons. Johann also learnt to play the violin with some proficiency. King Fiddler. Baron Knoop collected carriages and clocks and is said to employ a servant just to wind the clocks. I think this is Johann. Later on. In 1867, Johann worked in Paris with his friend George Wold, who would later marry his sister Adele. Johann married Henriette Louise Margareta Kern in 1874 at the Mühlental family residence, and shortly after that, Johann made his first significant instrument purchase. Years later, Arthur Hill would write in his diary, "It was in March of 1876, when the Baron was living at a house called St. Magnus, Forest Hill, moved to London by that time, that I personally delivered to him the beautiful Landolphus violoncello Johann bought of us for £55. £5. So it would seem that on moving to Forest Hill in southeast London, Johann named his house St Magnus in honour of the area where he grew up. The 1881 British census lists a 25-year-old Mary Knoop, married to Baron J.G.L. Knoop, living at St Magnus with their children Mary Louise and Ludwig and Mary's mother. But then tragedy struck. Johann had tremendously bad luck, says Harriet Grace, Johann's great-granddaughter. His wife died of TB in 1882 when she was 26. His two children grew up with TB, and his daughter died exactly 8 years to the day after he met his wife. That left him one son, Ludi, who did not fully recover from the disease until he was an adult. Johann spent a lot of his wealth on collecting. He collected carriages and clocks, and was said to employ a servant just to wind the clocks. Rich guy at this time, and by this point. Grace supposes that for Johann the instruments were something he could love, knowing they could not die. It was in the wake of his wife's death that Johann acquired both the 1701 Court Strad and the 1737 King Joseph Guarnerius del Gesù violins. Throughout the rest of the 1880s and 1890s, Johann continued to collect stringed instruments, acquiring the largest collection anyone has reputedly owned. Johann used these instruments regularly. Can you imagine the pleasure he must have had just going into his instrument store and just picking whichever one he fancied, Strad or Del Gesù. As Hill noted, he had a quartet meeting every week, and for a long time William Hill took part in it. Alexander Kummer being the leader and Hans Adolf Brusill the cellist, while Mr. Weber, another city merchant and good pianist, also at times contributed to the harmony. An account from Arthur Hill in 1915 suggests that Knoop paid for the privilege of performing with professional players. By 1893, Knoop had completed the impressive task of acquiring his second quartet of Stradivari instruments. This accomplishment would cause Hill to write, "Baron Johann is certainly the best customer we've ever had, and his collection of stringed instruments as regards quality is the finest the world's ever seen." Wow, what an endorsement from Hill. Johann attempted to reveal parts of his collection in 1915 when Arthur Hill wrote, "The Baron had offered the drawings of the collection of violins, his collection of violins to the British Museum, but our national institution had refused the proffered gift." The drawings were made in 1898, and Hill, after the rejection by the museum, suggested that if we can form our own museum containing everything appertaining to the violin, these drawings would find a worthy resting place therein. I don't know if they did create that museum. Or not. Which museum would it be? The Ashmolean? I don't know. I have to be researching the roots of the Ashmolean very soon, actually, because I'm going there soon. So I guess these drawings must be knocking about somewhere. Maybe Beers has them now. Who knows? Sharing a love of music and a similar history of childhood spread abroad, Johann first hired May, as he would call her, as a governess for his son in 1893, and though 30 years her senior, married her in 1899 when his son turned 18. So he got married for the second time to Mabel Caroline Stewart King, who was born in 1875 and died in 1945. Do you mind? Noisy bulldog. After the marriage to Maya, the Baron spent money on a mansion in Kent, a yacht, and a more lavish lifestyle, splashing out. From the start, though, the marriage was not a happy one. Once married, I soon realised I'd lost my freedom. Courtship ceased, and the Baron showed himself fanatically possessive. He stopped my playing and deposited my Stradivarius in a bank. She was a violinist, right? This young girl he married. It's still there for all I know. He cut me off from my acquaintances and friends and the patrons of my music. I was switched away to Russia, to Paris, to Egypt, finally to England, and all the while I was his private, almost his secret personal property. He affected to despise music and would never go to a concert. When he came to live here, he had no guests beyond the few members of his family. So his second wife slagging him off a bit there. If he was indeed that controlling, then that is a bit of a shame. At first, Maya obeyed the Baron and did completely as he wished, but eventually, according to Graham's account, she broke free from this jealous and morose Russian Baron, as Johann, in his later years, had left her fancy free. Arthur Hill documented one possible reason why Johann played the violin less frequently when he wrote, "As I've already recorded, I think she may long ago discouraged the Baron to continue his playing." So the Hills perhaps taking the side of their long-time customer. When he subsequently lost a lot of money on a sanatorium project in Egypt, his desire to maintain the lifestyle he'd become accustomed to is likely to have been a major reason for him to start selling his instruments. Arthur Hill had noticed a change around this time. As he wrote in 1904, "We had not the least idea that Baron Knoop would part with any of his violins. However, various changes have taken place, and Baron Knoop promises that the whole of the instruments in his unique collection shall come back to us." So, ending up having to flog his collection of violins. After June 1918, all of Knoop's Russian enterprises were nationalised. So then you had the Russian Revolution. All right, come here. Naughty boy. So you had the Bolshevik Revolution then, and they confiscated the family's businesses. With the exception of the Craneholm cotton mill in Estonia and the Knoops, Johann's two brothers and their families were forced to flee Russia. Though he was a hypochondriac for most of his life, Johann had relatively good health until 1918 when he suffered a stroke and died 6 months later. Maya, now completely out from under his influence, rechristened herself Baroness de Knoop, and in 1923 wrote Pauline, a well-reviewed book which the Los Angeles Times noted in 1924 has made an instantaneous success, which has already sent it to a second edition. The New York Times praised this thinly veiled autobiographical story, noting that the main character, Count Orloff, treats Pauline as an adopted daughter rather than a wife. She later remarried an even richer man. David Fulton, in real life, not in the, well, maybe in the book as well. David Fulton, like me, Knoop was very interested in the sound because he played himself. I think that's what motivated him. So, quite a fascinating upper class life, and gives you insight a little bit into the personality of this violin collector. I'll just tell you a little bit about this guy, Jericho. He's being babysat. He doesn't live here, but he comes here a couple of days a week. And he's an absolute gem of a dog. He's a nutcase, but he's the most gentle, secure dog I think I've ever met. I say he's a nutcase because he just barges around, charges around the room playing with my other dog all day. And he loves to play, but he's such a gentle dog. He gets on with every other dog pretty much, because I think he's very secure. Even when dogs growl at him and bark at him and things. So I've become quite fond of this guy, even though he sounds like a little piggy. It's not his fault. It's because you're a bulldog, mate. So let's switch now to a review of the instruments, which is in the Strad magazine, and we'll look at the Tarisio ones as well. So we've got the Baron Knoop Amati at Antonio and Girolamo Amati. We've got the Stauffer, which I recognise that name. Antonio and Girolamo Amati, which I believe I saw in Cremona in the museum. And Niccolo Amati violin from 1645. Carlo Bergonzi, Earl of Warncliffe, Knoop Landau. The Carlo Bergonzi Chrysler Perlman. I just want to pause for a moment on Bergonzi because according to common consensus, shall we say, amongst violin specialists, Stradivari is the number one, Guarnerius del Gesù is the number two. That is debatable. There are many players that would say for them Guarnerius del Gesù is number one. People like Ricci, Heifetz, Grumio prefer del Gesù. But I guess Stradivari was a more refined maker. There's a reason for that, because del Gesù was under pressure, financial pressure that Stradivari didn't experience. Stradivari was well-to-do, he was doing well. Guarnerius was having to rush his instruments and make a quick buck. despite that, he still produced instruments that, whilst not aesthetically could be as perfect as a Strad, still produced just a tone, a sound that would just knock you over. Arguably, maybe a more powerful sound than the Strad. So Strad and Del Gesù are kind of vying for top position. I would put them on an equal number one spot. But let's just say, for argument's sake, that Strad is number one. Number two is Del Gesù, Buenos Aires Del Gesù, and number three would be GB Guadagnini. Okay. Well, Carlo Bergonzi, I think, could arguably be maybe a contender for number three. Maybe we would say the number four best violin. It's indeed, here we have violin number 5, which was played by Chrysler and Perlman. I guess Perlman traded that in to get his Strad eventually. And also, I believe Nigel Kennedy plays a Carlo Bergonzi, a super violin on a par with a Strad or a Del Gesù almost. And I believe that the Bergonzi clan were working out of Stradivari's workshop for a while, had a very close association with Stradivarius, and that's where they gained their skills. All right, let's move on. A Gasparo da Salo viola, early instrument. Francesco Gobetti, 1914 Baron Knoop. Sorry, the da Salo is Knoop Ferrier. Let me zoom in. Ferrier. A GB Guadagnini, a Matteo Gaffrilla from 1698, a GB Guadagnini from 1744, his 3 Del Gesus, 1735 and 1737, Baron Gutman, Baron Knoop, Plowden, King Joseph, a Peter Guarnerius of Venice, C 1739, Beatrice Harrison, another one, 1743, Baron Knoop, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 Maginis, 1600 to 32. Some of these are cellos. I'm failing to mention. Viola, cello, violin, Dumas tenor, Chimay Sandeman, Dumas, Dorla, de Berrio. We're recognising other collector names in here in the mix as well. Francesco Ruggieri violin, 1687, Baron Knoop. Vincenzo Ruggieri violin, C 1700, Baron Knoop. Santa Serafin, 1743, Baron Knoop. Jacob Steiner, Baron Knoop. Steiner was the top violin until Strad knocked it off its perch. And Steiner and Amati kind of were the top ones. But by Paganini's day, they were almost antique violins, some of them. And Strad was beginning to get recognised with through Viotti, Paganini and others as really the top violin. But I guess in Strad's day, these were modern violins. Some of the Amatis were becoming antique. Right, now we have a whole host of Strads. So the Cellier from 1672 violin, 1694 Bayo Pomero, 1696 Spanish court viola. This is how he built up his quartet, I guess. I'll dig into the quartets a bit later. 1698 Baron Knoop, 1701 MacDonald, 1701 Court Strad, 1709 Viotti. Wow, that's in the Royal Academy. I've seen that violin. 1711 Park, 1711 Dupont, 1714 Batta. So Dupont and Batta cellos. 1714 Joachim violin. The Barrow Joachim 1714 violin, the Baron Knoop Bevan 1715 violin. So he had a long period Strad and a number of long period Strads and a number of golden period Strads. The Lady Blunt 1721, still within the golden period, which I think ended in 1725, after which the late period begins. The Lady Blunt is one we want to single out as one of the best preserved, along with, I think, the Dolphin, the Messiah. The Cassavetti from 1727, late period Strad, viola, And then 1730 cello, Paul Benvenuto. 1731 viola from Strad, Paganini Mendelssohn, so that's part of the Paganini Quartet, I guess. Check that. 1734 Gibson St. Senok viola. I think the Paganini Quartet is owned by Nippon now. So what a collection! I mean, we can home in now on this Lady Blunt, which in some years ago sold in 2011 sold for 9.8 million. I can't imagine what that's worth now. One of the best preserved. It's going to be pushing 8 figures, isn't it? The Man of Property, who was Baron von Knoop. Yeah, cool. So here is where I want to talk about the Tarisio articles, in particular this one. So let's look at so if you go to the Cosio archive on Tarisio, so for example you search for Lady Blunt violin, let's just show that, and then you go down, you probably need a Tarisio membership to do this. Unless you're on the free trial, they'll let you have so many clicks, and then they'll expect you to pay up. But it's worth paying, by the way, for that. And then you see Baron Knoop here. You click through, and then you get to all of the instruments they have as him owning. So I think they're all covered by the Strad already. A small detail here: the Niccolo Amati is called Allard. I'm not sure if the Strad article mentioned the name. No, it's left it blank. There's the Steiner. Okay, there's his Stradivarius violins. Gibson St. Senok viola. Was that mentioned in the Strad article? 1734. Yes. The bottom one, actually. Yeah, the Chrysler violin, Peter Guarnerius. Beatrice Harrison and Baron Knoop. Here Tarisio have a Chrysler violin that wasn't mentioned in the Strad. But this is Peter of Mantua. This is the uncle of Peter of Venice. Okay. What else we got? Gibson Huberman violin, Del Gesù, yeah. King, Dumas tenor, viola, Plowden, Joachim Marr, 1714 Salieri, yep. Cello. So some of these I may struggle to find pictures for. I have to Google them separately. The Stauffer, that's easy. This Amati, you can just go to the Museo or my videos. I've got pictures of videos of that. There's the Chrysler Perlman Bergonzi. Nice that Perlman's got an instrument named after him. Because his Strad is the Soil, I think, Strad, not named after him. Maybe it will be one day. Soil Perlman, after he passes that on, I guess. But here he's got an instrument named after him, and the rest we recognise from the Strad group. So cool, awesome. So that is the collection of Baron von Knoop. I thought it was worthy of a video, and let's just show some pictures now, the instruments, and I'll leave links to these articles in the description. So yeah, these instruments are now dispersed all over the place, but imagine if he had made a museum and they were all still in that museum. We would have a treasure trove of instruments in London, but perhaps you know, it's better that they were dispersed and continue to be played on. Although some instruments arguably now should probably find their final resting place in a museum rather than just be battered beyond being playable. But that's a separate topic to be discussed another time maybe. So that was my video on Baron von Knoop. That was what I had to say on Baron von Knoop, and thank you for listening. Ciao. you.